Hello and welcome to OTH Sports View. I'm Herald Sports Editor Chuck Pollock. It's been 1 week since we last did a video, and in that time the St. Bonaventure men split a couple of games and the Bona women swept. Our guests are the usual ones. On my right, JP Butler in his 7th year covering the Bona men, and on my left, Jeff Madigan in his initial year reporting on the Bona women. JP, we'll start with you. JP, going into the Hofstra game, we talked about it, and you expressed the thought that you would not at all be surprised if Hofstra won the game. I think to a lot of Bona fans, that was unthinkable. After all, it's not a particularly high-profile game in their view, playing at the Riley Center. But clearly, after watching what unfolded last Saturday at the Riley Center, it's a pretty good team.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're as good as I thought they would probably be. This is a team that brought back 4 or 5 starters from a 20-win postseason team last year. They were picked to win the Colonial Athletic Association this year. They have the preseason player of the year in Wanye Green, who Bona fans may be familiar with from his early days at Niagara, who's a very good player. And they're well coached, coached by Joe Mahalik, another name that Bona fans are certainly familiar with, especially with his success that we've seen in the Riley Center. And so that's the kind of veteran team they bring in, and so there was a chance that this game could be a tough one, and it was. And I think the encouraging thing for Bonas is that they played a really good first half. They were up double digits against a team of that caliber early on, which is good. But then it was just kind of the same kind of thing that we've seen before a lot of times in the past, where they lose that lead. The other team kind of makes some adjustments. They go on that little stretch where they kind of take the game over, and Bona ends up, losing it in the end. And in this one too, it was just kind of another sign of kind of a concern we've seen early on, and that's the defensive side where Bona has had stretches, in particular second halves, where they haven't played good enough defense at all, and that was the case last Saturday in this Hofstra game. They gave up 52 second half points. They kind of let Green go off in the second half. That was a concern then. That was kind of the reason they lost that game, and it's sort of reared its head at times throughout the season, and something to kind of look at going forward.
One of the things I found interesting, and you pointed this out a couple of times already this year, the first half leads that you alluded to, and then struggling after intermission. What struck me differently this time was they were up 10 first half. You thought maybe they're going to just kind of run away with this. Right. Second half, they go down by 11, and Hofstra seemed unstoppable offensively. Right. And then Bona did muster a rally and gets to a point 40 seconds left where a 3 will tie the game. It was kind of an interesting sine wave the way it evolved.
Right, and that's, I guess that's probably another encouraging kind of thing that, in the face of adversity, they didn't just go away at that point. They came back against a pretty good team and had an opportunity to, tie or even take the lead at the end and still pull that game out. But again, it's just, I think some of the things they have to still work on. This is a group that is still kind of learning to play together. They have Dion Wright, and then they've got a lot of guys who are in their first and second year. I mean, even Marcus Posley, who's a veteran guy, is still only in his second year here. So I do think there's something to the idea that they're learning to play together, and it's learning to be better defensively, which they did take a step forward in last night against UB, and it's learning to close some games out. At the end of that Hofstra game, before they went on their little run to pull back to within 1, they had some opportunities to pull even closer then, and then maybe when they did go on that run at the end, maybe then that's for the to take the lead rather than just to kind of get close, and they weren't able to do that. So there's some things at the end of the games they're still trying to figure out, and they're gonna have to be able to do that if they're gonna win games in conference play.
You and I don't consider that a bad loss. Against UB, a 60-58 victory, that very well could have been a terrible loss. Bona was not up huge, but it did have a 9-point lead in the later going, then just kind of fell apart offensively, turning the ball over 8 straight possessions without scoring. A loss at Alumni Arena would have been a disaster.
It would have been bad just because of the way they would have lost it. I mean, that was such a weird game, and we were even saying at the time, just how odd of a game it was, where, Bona gets one basket in the final 6 minutes of the game and wins. They get, they shoot 2 for 21 from 3-point range, and they win the game. And from UB's side, they couldn't have been worse at times offensively, and they still have a chance to win at the end. So it would have been bad just from the standpoint of, UB really had no business winning that game, and still almost did. But fortunately for Bona, Deion Wright played a great game before that last little stretch where they couldn't score. He had a career high 26 points, just scoring every which way in the lane, 12 of 19 from the field overall. And even though he had kind of a not great game overall, Marcus Posley again hits the big shot at the end. We've seen him do that before, and he did it again last night. He hits the jumper at the free throw line with 8 seconds left to put him up 2, and then they were able to get a stop, at the very end to come out with a win. And again, a lot of concerns I think in that one from 3-point range. They were already not very good, and then in this one they're even worse, 2 for 21. Posley, after those 2 real good games, has 2 more here now, Hofstra and UB, where he's not shooting it all that well and kind of not attacking the way he was. Again, some of the late game issues, but a win on the road against a team that is going to be competitive, going to be decent this year. They'll probably take that, as ugly as it was.
Final question. We've talked about this throughout the season. 8-person roster, scholarship roster. Last night at UB, it almost bit them. 21 fouls. Denzel Gregg only played like 12 minutes before fouling out. Guys with 3 and 4 fouls. They got some good news because they're going to maybe get a player back who will lengthen that bench just a bit, and they kind of need it.
And that's good to bring up now because there is kind of an update on that situation. Jordan Tyson, who, the redshirt 6'10" forward who tore a tendon in his wrist in August, right before getting back to school. Originally, it looked like it might be a season-ending injury. I mean, that's what we were hearing at the time. Bona thought it was kind of grim at the time, but healing much faster than expected. We saw, a photo on the Go Bona Twitter account yesterday of kind of a shoot-around before the game yesterday, and they're playing 5-on-5. Tyson's right in the mix. And so I asked just a couple of people connected with the program, and they acknowledged that he is back to practicing again, although kind of on a limited basis. But he's got the cast off, he's moving, he's playing, and they said that there's no guarantee that he's back before conference play, but there's a chance he could be back before conference play, and if not then, probably soon thereafter. So much better news than people originally expected with this injury. And again, just from shoring up the front court and having another body, at least to get it to 9 guys, that'll be big to have him back.
We'll talk about the Bona women next. Jeff, a good week for the Bona women. Victory at home over Toledo, and they followed that up with a nice road victory at Stony Brook, although hard earned. The Toledo game was interesting. You say, well, yeah, you're going to beat a team that's 0-5 and comes into the home court of the Bona women, but Bona has struggled with them in the past, and you could certainly argue that Toledo's schedule was stronger than what Bona had played coming in.
Absolutely. Toledo's played very tough teams, and Coach Jim Crowley told me that. I mean, they played Albany, which was a tough team. They played some of the teams that they played this year. They lost close games. They got blasted by Notre Dame, but that's not really you can use that as a teaching tool. But yeah, they were 0-4, 0-5 coming in, and they're still winless, to be honest with you. But I mean, in the early season, you really don't look at the records to determine how good or how bad a team is. That's a good basketball team, good team. Good. They'll be good in the MAC this season. And the Bonnies, they were at times they did struggle with them, on Sunday, but they were lucky to, and they're talented enough to come out with a victory. And same thing on Tuesday night against Stony Brook.
Stony Brook game was interesting.
Yeah.
Seemed like the Bona women had that in hand, and all of a sudden Stony Brook made a pretty inspired comeback, and this would have been a very easy game to lose. I don't know if we'd have called it a bad loss, but I think Jim Crowley would have.
Yeah, well, it probably would have been a bad loss. They were up by 11 midway through the third quarter, and Stony Brook just kept chipping away. I mean, they had a good crowd, a good band that you could visibly or audibly hear over the radio broadcast. And, you know, it's a game that the Bonnies are fortunate enough to come away with a victory, and it's a game that they were never trailing. And I didn't know this until I looked at the stats afterward. They were never trailing that game by more than 3. And one of those times they were trailing by 3 was about 6 seconds left in regulation, right before Miranda Drummond hit the game-tying three-pointer that changed everything pretty much.
It was a game where we talk about this all the time, that this is a talented team,
Yep.
and they have depth. But I don't know that we've really seen it until this game. There was major help off the bench this time.
And the bench is getting gradually better and better, and that's girls like Gabby Richmond, Matea Brickbar, and Imani Outlaw. Now, Imani didn't have the best game, going against Stony Brook, but Gabby and Matea continually come off the bench when Katie Healy gets into foul trouble, when Miranda Drummond gets into foul trouble, and maybe they're just missing their shots. And Coach Crowley has relied on Gabby and Matea to come up with huge baskets, huge rebounds, good defense when those two are in foul trouble, like Katie was for most of the fourth quarter, first overtime and second overtime. I want to say Katie got her 4th foul with maybe 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, so she had to play smart defense the rest of the way. To her credit, she did, and she was very big in that second overtime.
She was, and in reading your story, offensively, especially in the late going, she took the game over.
She did. She missed like I mentioned to Coach Crowley afterwards. She missed a couple free throws in the first overtime that maybe the Bonnies could have put Stony Brook away, but she didn't let that get her down. She scored 8 points out of the Bonnies' 10 points in the second overtime, and that's very much part of the reason why they won. And she scored 26 points total, and had 7 rebounds, I believe it was. And that's one of her best outings as a Bonnie. It was not her career high. She had 28 2 seasons ago, but 26 points, and they needed every one of those points.
One of the things we talked about last week, they're in a nice stretch.
Yeah.
As far as being at home, they tend to perform well at home. This is a streak where they could make some hay.
Right. They're 3-0 so far at home this season, and it's a nice stretch in the fact that you never have to leave the Riley Center, but it's not a nice stretch based on the opposition that is coming in here. You got Georgetown this Saturday, you've got James Madison on Monday night, you've got UB on Wednesday, and then you got Penn State on the following Saturday, the 12th. And that's 4 teams that are going to come in here and play their best basketball, and it's going to be 4 very good basketball games. The Bonnies beat Georgetown last year, they beat Penn State last year, and they lost to James Madison and UB, and all of those games were away from the Riley Center. So we'll have to see how the Bonnies react to coming back home and playing these 4 tough teams, 4 very good teams here at the Riley Center.
Final thought, Jeff. This is your first year covering the team, but you're an alum. After you graduated, you've gone to a lot of games. Is there anything that you've seen this year that's been unexpected to you?
Honestly, I don't know nothing surprises me with a Coach Crowley team, and especially looking at the game Tuesday night, where you think that they probably should have had that game under control in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, and they didn't. And that's where maybe some teams, they lose that lead down the stretch, they kind of collapse and just give the game away in the first overtime. And the Bonnies didn't do that. They were down for much. I want to say they were losing for maybe 40 minutes and 45 seconds, 4:15 of the first overtime, and they never let it get away from them. They very well could have committed a stupid foul that would have put Stony Brook at the line and given them 2 free throws that would have lost the game, and they didn't do that. And then throughout the second overtime, very solid defense, very strong, smart play, and that's why they came away with the victory. But in terms of anything surprising me, no, I wouldn't say that, because you never know what to expect from a Crowley team. Expect good defense, and they're starting to get to that point.
That's OTH Sports View. We'll see you again next week.